614 Productions is proud to present the Not So Neutral Zone, a podcast for armchair enthusiasts by armchair enthusiasts. The opinions expressed on this show are those of us, the participants, and not representative of any major sports leagues, organizations, teams, or athletes. Just our own opinions, even if they're wrong. I'm I'm Jacob Smith. With me is David Trexler, and we're back after a 2-3 week hiatus.
Just about, yeah. It's been we're 1 week shy of, I think, a month almost, because we had a lot of crazy stuff going on. You graduated.
Yes, I got my associate's degree, so it's on to bigger and better things to pursue my bachelor's.
But still here. We're still here.
We're still here.
I'm taking a hiatus from school for a while so I can kind of get this more solid with this and all my other activities, because I'm just staying so slammed with everything. School's kind of out there.
But we've had a lot of things happen. What do you want to talk about first? You want to talk about history being made again with the Triple Crown?
Yeah, I actually was flipping through the channels and didn't even realize that was on yesterday. Didn't even know that a horse had won. Now, when American Pharoah did, it was everywhere. So when I was going through and they started talking about it, I'm like, okay, I'm going to watch this for once, because new thing for the show. And the whole time it just amazed me. Out of the gate, Justify was just head above everybody else. And just like Rob Gronkowski, his horse was in the race and was way back. Didn't look like it was going to have a chance, and just out of nowhere, second place for a horse that was not looked at as being one of the top 3 horses for the race. They didn't even have this horse top 5 after the end of the race, but Justify did an awesome job. The jockey, Mike Smith, oldest person to ever win the Triple Crown at 52 years old. The trainer of the horse was the trainer of American Pharoah, so this was kind of a lot of history for one day for horse racing.
The only other trainer that has had 2 horses win the Triple Crown was Jim Fitzsimmons with Gallant Fox in Omaha in 1930 and 1935. So, pretty impressive. He joined some prestigious company there.
Yeah, there's people that would say it was they wouldn't have thought American Pharoah was going to do it, and then for Justify to do it, it's kind of incredible to have 2 in basically 4 years after not having one for 37 years.
Yeah. Now, since before American Pharoah, it was affirmed in 78 was the last one to do it. And then Pharoah did it in 2015. So, some history there. Joins 12 other Triple Crown winners. It's not an easy thing to do. But there is one thing that it can join even more rare company, and that's if they win, what was it called? American Pharoah won it. They won some other race as well.
Well, another stat is
the Breeders' Cup Classic.
Yeah,
but they call that the Grand Slam now, winning the 3 plus the Breeders' Classic, and only American Pharoah has done that.
The other thing about Justify is it's the only horse besides Seattle Slew to not have lost a race when it won the Triple Crown. The other 11 had lost a race during that span. Yeah. But when you think about it, that would be the equivalent to a football player, baseball player, basketball player, hockey player, any of those guys winning MVP, Super Bowl, and the NFL MVP in one season will be like their thing. Or in NASCAR, it'd be like winning Daytona 500, winning Indianapolis, winning the Coke 600. Every sport's got that big deal that you want to win. And speaking of other sports, the Washington Capitals won their first Stanley Cup against the expansion Vegas Knights. I had not even known at the time that both teams were going for their first title. Impressive. Then we go to the big story of the week. I mean, like they were talking during after the Belmont was over, how incredible to cap off such a big week with Justify winning the Triple Crown. A few days before that, less than a week ago, the Capitals win their first championship, and the Golden State Warriors sweep the Cavaliers, which is our next point. I didn't watch games 1 through 3. I watched game 4 because I'm not a game 1-2 guy when it comes to our 3 American sports to do the series. And I knew, because I was talking to somebody at work and they were like, "Are you going to watch it?" I said, "I'll probably watch it," because at the time I didn't realize it, but after us looking before we started, there has been a sweep against LeBron's team. And aside from talking about that, that game was it was a runaway for Golden State. They had command of that game. You could tell either Cleveland just didn't have the heart or what, but they just didn't even show up.
I mean, you can look, and I was the same way. I dipped in and watched a little bit of each game. Not really a whole lot. And obviously most everyone has seen the end to regulation of Game 1, which was the closest the series was the whole time. But I think you could tell after Game 1 that Cleveland they weren't in it. I don't know, maybe if their heart wasn't right, maybe all this swirling around if LeBron's leaving or not. I don't know. It just seems to get to them.
Well, before we go on to talk about the little more, I just gotta throw out our little kind of congratulations, I guess. The 2016-2017 basketball season and 2017-2018 Golden State went back-to-back. In hockey, we had the Penguins last year, the Capitals this year. The Eagles and Astros are the reigning champs of their sport. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I don't see anybody but Golden State repeating from last season to the current seasons as champion, because there's been a lot of big moves in NFL that somebody, especially when you start looking at all the moves that the NFC South's done. I mean, you got to say congratulations to the NFC East. Whether you're an Eagles fan, Redskins fan, Cowboys or Giants fan, you got to be impressed that your division is the first one to win for every team to win Super Bowl. Who's the best division? I think next to do that, obviously it's one of the 2 teams in the NFC South that has not won it. Is our teams, Atlanta and Carolina.
Yeah.
And Minnesota had the best chance last year. I think Atlanta's got a good shot. I'm not going to say go ahead and punch their ticket to the Super Bowl, but it would be a nice way to bring in your second season in your new stadium.
Oh yeah, I think a chance to play the championship game in your own stadium is something that you have to want. So like that's one thing that I'm a little envious with, like baseball and basketball and hockey. The sports that do the series where they go back and forth. If you get to win the series in your hometown or your team's town, I mean, there's nothing better. You can walk into any building for the rest of the week and you're not paying for anything. You're the hero for the whole town. I mean, that's something everyone would want to be.
What I think would be an interesting approach and a change is, I don't know if basketball uses the All-Star game for it, but I know in baseball, the All-Star game, the winning team in the All-Star game, NLAL, they get
it
home
actually
field.
Doesn't do that anymore. They stopped doing that. Yeah, I think they alternate now.
Well,
that sucks.
Like in NFL, if you're going to award a Super Bowl, how many years has it been since the Panthers played the Broncos? What, 3?
Yeah, 3.
Okay, so this year the NFC hosts the Super Bowl, or the NFC is the designated home team. So what I think the NFL should do when they're awarding Super Bowls to cities is only let the teams from that conference bid that year if they're going to be the designated home team. Then say, like this year, the NFC's designated home team. Atlanta would be the designated home team, the actual home team if they made the Super Bowl, which would be a pretty cool thing.
To rewind just a minute, I had a fun fact. Another fun Triple Crown winner that I always like to mention whenever we start talking about Triple Crowns is the last NFL receiver to lead the league in receptions, yards, and touchdowns. Do you know who that is? In 2005, Steve Smith of the Panthers was the last receiver to do that. All right, give me a second. So we need to start talking about LeBron. All right, well, LeBron James. What is the deal with LeBron James?
Well,
does he deserve to be in the greatest of all time discussion? I'm gonna let you run with that because I know you can run with that.
even though he played for my favorite basketball team, the Heat, no, because at the same time, if you're going to argue he's the greatest, then you're going to have to bring in guys from other sports as well to make them the greatest of their sports too. Because him, Brady, and I want to say Derek Jeter is probably the baseball equivalent of the 3 that have that same track record and championships. Because, everybody always compares your championships. But when LeBron James has lost the same amount of finals that Michael Jordan won, you can't. But at the same time, my deal is I hate when people compare them because we skip over one other guy, and that is Kobe. Because everybody talked about when Kobe came in, is he the next Michael Jordan? Possibly. Is LeBron the next Michael Jordan? Yes, he could be the next Michael Jordan, but let's not try to say, oh, well, he's the greatest of all time. If you're going to do that, you got to bring Bill Russell into the conversation too, because he was the greatest of his era. And I think Michael was in that era when you could be the featured attraction and you had your supporting cast. I mean, he had Pippen, Rodman, he had Tony, he had Grant, then Kobe. He had his guys. Kobe had his version of Dennis Rodman and Ron Artest, Metta World Peace, whichever one you call him. And then LeBron has his Rodman in Kevin Love. So it's like it's an era thing. I would probably put him as one of if you had your top, if you had your starting 5 like your all-time greats.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna say Jordan, Kobe, LeBron, Russell, and Larry Bird probably. Maybe Kareem, Dr. J. You just have so many different guys you could lump in. Wilt, because of the 10,000. First guy to do a 100-point game. But he did it at a time when it wasn't...
Yeah, the sport was very different back then. I have to give you that. Your comment about Kobe not getting the same kind of treatment that LeBron really got me thinking. I wonder why, though. Why Kobe... Maybe it's because we've seen Kobe's career come to an end. That's when the comparison stopped. But maybe we should just appreciate LeBron for what he has been able to do. I mean, 8 straight finals, 2 different teams?
8 straight, 9 overall.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the hardest comparison is that we always have to have our greatest replacement. You want to cause a war?
Mm-hmm.
Say that another baseball player is the greatest of all time over Babe Ruth. It starts an argument.
Oh, that'll start a war with me. Babe did it before anybody else. But I think another thing we need to look at with Cleveland, with LeBron, I won't just say Cleveland because 4 of his appearances came in Miami. But something else with LeBron is the quality of the opponents he's faced. A lot of people want to talk about his team and how he's never really had a star to run with and all this. But think about the 90s Bulls. Did they really run into quality teams like LeBron has, especially 4 years in a row against Golden State, who kind of changed the game? You know, before them, you know, you're kind of playing LeBron's game, and then when Golden State comes in, they're shooting threes from half court. So they kind of changed the game. So I want to say that he's kind of run into more quality opponents than some of the other greats.
3 of the greatest players that Michael Jordan faced in the finals was in his first finals, Magic Johnson with the Lakers. Then he went to 2 in a row against one of the greatest assist guys and one of the greatest guys before Steph Curry and Ray Allen came along was John Stockton. And you can't forget one other guy just because of his nickname, the mailman, Karl Malone.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if you look, you cannot go back to... You got to go back to basically 1989 with Isaiah Thomas and the Detroit Pistons to not mention NBA Finals and one of the 3 guys we're talking about, because Jordan went to 6 out of 8 finals before with the 2 years he retired, and then when he left Chicago. Then there was that 1 year lull. Then from 99 to 2009, it looked to the 2010 finals basically. You're looking at a big stretch there where Kobe was almost there every year. Him and Shaq were dominating their teams. Then you had Tim Duncan and the Spurs domination with 4 appearances from 99 to 2007. And another interesting fact is these last 2 years weren't the first time that a team connected to Kevin Durant played against LeBron, and that was when Oklahoma City played him. But the interesting thing is, every team that LeBron is connected to where he could potentially land next year has been to the finals at least, well, with the exception of one, but I was going to hit on these two. The top 10 teams that I've heard he's been linked to are, of course, Golden State.
That I think they should just... I mean, you're just going to hand them the trophy if he goes there. Unless they implode with his attitude clashing with other people.
When I ranked them, because I love doing the ranking things, the 1 through 10 where he could potentially land. But there's Golden State, the LA Lakers, Houston Rockets. Again, for the second time with him considering leaving, the New York Knicks are in the conversation. The Miami Heat are in there. Cleveland's still a potential landing spot for him to return. The Boston Celtics. Now, these last 3 surprised me kind of. The San Antonio Spurs, the LA Clippers, and the Philadelphia 76ers. Almost called them the Eagles. But here's how I ranked them and why I think he will or won't sign with the team. Number 10 out of those 10 is the Boston Celtics. Because Kyrie Irving wants to stay in Boston. I don't see Boston bringing him in with Kyrie there, because that might be a little clash over the ill feelings in Cleveland. Cleveland, I don't see him staying, because he's going to want to go somewhere that he can guarantee himself another championship. Number 8, Golden State. Because in order to get him, I saw where they said they would have to get rid of, I can't think of his name. I'm trying to think of the guy's name now. I can't. Klay Thompson and not Curry, not Durant or Iguodala, but Klay Thompson was one of the guys, and Draymond Green. But they said since those 2 guys are so young, Durant would be the most likely departure from the team. But that's too much money for them to incur. The Knicks is number 7. And honestly, this one, I say no chance. But if it were me, I'd love to take the chance and jump and be on the team that has the team president who took Kobe and Michael to all those championships they went to. Basically, I think Phil Jackson's he's basically 10, 12, 11, 1, something like that in the finals. Great numbers to have for a president. Number 6 is the Spurs. I don't see him fitting, mainly because they're in the Western Conference.
Yeah, I think he would definitely want to stay in the Eastern, unless it was Golden State, obviously.
Number 5 landing spot is the Clippers. I don't see him going to the Clippers just because, I don't know,
That would be interesting, especially since the Lakers haven't been great since Kobe's departure, to try to come in there and, bring that team up from kind of being mediocre.
Number 4, the only team that has an interesting front office that would fit with him, and that's Philadelphia. That would be a good fit for him. Plus, it's still close enough to home. He's not going to relocate big. Number 3. And the only reason they're number 3 and not top 2 is because the top 2 teams have been the strongest potential. Number 3 is the Miami Heat, because Dwayne Wade said he wants to finish his career in Miami. He got to go play for Chicago like he wanted, but he's back in Miami where he belongs. And that was a major selling point for LeBron last time. I think Dwayne Wade could be a bigger influence than any other players on any of the other teams I've said so far. Next up on the list is 2 Western teams, the Lakers. I think the Lakers would jump at the bit to get him, because then they could say they had 2 of the greatest all time wear their jersey. I don't feel confident. I still feel, not because I'm a Heat fan, but I think I see LeBron going back to Miami because Dwayne's there and he's got a good relationship with Eric Spoelstra and Pat Riley. That one's a good shot, but that's not the spot that everybody keeps saying he's going to go. They keep saying the biggest spot for him to go is a team that has not been in the NBA Finals since 1995. The Houston Rockets is supposedly the best team to get to land him. The only thing I hope is that he doesn't take an hour to tell us, I'm going to South Beach, I'm going to Hollywood, I'm going to Launch City.
Well, see, that's what he did the first time he moved. And then when he came back home, I think it was, it wasn't an ESPN reporter that got to break it. It was another, I think it might have been a Fox reporter, that he just sat down and had a one-on-one interview and told him basically what was going on. Not a TV special or any of that.
Well, to an extent, I think that the LeBron that decided to leave Miami and go back to Cleveland, and this LeBron may be a little more mature than that egocentric, even though I still feel he has a big ego. I think his ego, after what he's
I think you have to have a big ego to be one of the greatest.
He's only won 1 championship in 5 years.
That's
if you go
true.
back, or if you go back to 8 years, he's only won 3 in 8 years. But maybe it's just, maybe LeBron's got that more maturity, because from what I understand, his son, his oldest son, will be getting ready to come into the league. And that's been another draw that a lot of people said is he might try to find a team that may be interested in drafting his son, or what are the odds? What are the odds that anybody, I mean, it's rare in professional sports, except in racing, is about the only sport that you can see it, where a parent, and the reason I say parent is because in motorsports, it's women and men together, it's not separate. But how incredible would it be to see a guy who has been listed as one of the best all-time basketball players play in the same league as his son? It would be good for him, maybe good for his son, but I think it might overshadow his son a little bit. But could you imagine him and his son playing in the NBA Finals against each other, and him and his son winning against him? It would be one of those situations where he's like, I'm disappointed that I didn't win it, but I got to be happy for my son because he got his first one. Kind of like the whole Dell Curry, Stephen Curry thing is, you got to be proud to a point that your kid accomplished this goal that you did. And I say that from kind of experience. I mean, I was never good enough to play on a soccer team, but I've had the opportunity the last 2 years to coach one. And this year, for one of my kids to score their first goal while I'm coaching them, and for her to get that reaction, you're kind of like, okay, I'm staying impartial in this because I've got a team of 8 kids, and you're like, that's the thing I want to do. It would be cool to play on a team with your kid, but at the same time, you don't want to overstep them. And I think his son could potentially do good with LeBron. I don't see LeBron being like another father in the NBA right now, who every time his kids, something bad happens to them, he tries to throw the staff and everything under the bus. When just on a spitball, because LeVar Ball would have a comment about LeBron coming to the Lakers and overshadowing his son.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, it's like, you need to be hands off on your career. Kind of like Howie Long is with his son and the Matthews.
Mm-hmm.
I think you got to have that. You got to understand where that line is of being parent and trying to live through your kids.
Do you try to live through your kids?
Only if I could kind of get a little bit of their energy. That would probably be it.
One final point I'd like to bring up about maybe the consideration of LeBron as the greatest of all time is how hard it is to get to a championship or finals in any sport. And the fact that he's done it 9 times, and wherever he goes for next season is likely to be the favorite for number 10, how much does that play into it? He has 9 appearances, 3 wins. The only other person I'm seeing on this list with 9 appearances is Magic Johnson. So how much do you think that plays into it?
Yeah, Magic had that incredible run. I think his went from the 1979-1980 season through the 90-91 season against the Bulls. And
he won 5. He won 5, where LeBron has won 3.
So, and it goes back to the whole Babe Ruth thing. When a player starts touching on another player's greatness, everybody wants to start throwing marks in the book. Like when Barry Bonds broke the home run record, Roger Maris broke the single season record. Let's throw asterisks in the book. Why can't we just judge people on their era? And it's because it seems like in today's NBA, all the talent wants to gravitate towards one team. Where in Magic's day, Michael's day, Kobe's day, you went wherever you could get a good supporting cast. It wasn't all about
you were the
money.
Star. The stars wanted to be the star and have their own team, and I'm the star. You build around me, and now the rise of the super team, which ironically was kind of started by LeBron, has kind of changed the game.
For me, the one thing when I think about great players is Babe Ruth. When he played, he didn't try to say, I'm the greatest out here. He went out there, done what he done best, played ball. He played hard, he lived hard, but he was that. Wayne Gretzky's another one. He went out there and played. He didn't try to become the great one, even though that moniker got put on him. Kind of the same with Jordan. Initially, early in his career, he was not trying to be the greatest. It was just, okay, he became it. It seems like now they're trying to thrust this greatest of all time on players. Mm-hmm. And kind of like with Brady. Brady's labeled as the greatest of all time. If you go by how they played, honestly, I feel Bart Starr, Dan Marino, Brett Favre, those guys could have been labeled the greatest of all time. They might not have had the stats, the championships, but with Dan Marino, he pretty much owned every record in the record book before Peyton come along and broke all of them.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, I think the reason Jordan gets labeled the greatest of all time in basketball is because he came out, he played hard, he had a cast around him that made him good. When you start trying to come in there and try all this other stuff, kind of like now they say, well, Brady's out of the conversation for greatest of all time because of his numbers. If you're going to argue that, then if you're a sports writer like for one of the big networks, and you're going to say, well, LeBron deserves to be in the argument for greatest of all time basketball, but at the same time you're going to come along and say Brady's not the greatest of all time. You can't do that because these two guys pretty much have a mirror career, even though one plays more games a season than the other. So it's kind of like when we were doing our Mount Rushmore. Yeah. You know, we kind of deferred. But at the same time, it's not that easy to compare these guys.
I think with because it does seem like Brady, I see it the opposite way, where Brady has kind of been put on this pedestal for winning all these championships in a sport that requires a lot of team effort. The last 3 Patriots Super Bowl wins are pretty much on Brady's shoulders. But his first 3, he had a pretty good defense. People forget that, but the Patriots defense was stout. Especially the Panthers Patriots Super Bowl, where it was 3 quarters. 3 quarters of it was a defensive showdown, and the fourth quarter they scored like 26 combined points. It was ridiculous.
That kind of goes along with the same thing with. I know everybody probably gets tired of hearing us talk about our favorite teams, but again, the Patriots are in the conversation, so we got to bring our guys in it. Mm-hmm. Kind of like with the Falcons one. You know, 3 quarters, Atlanta's defense shut New England down. I think they may have done too much too soon and not went for that fourth quarter, but that fourth quarter kind of is a thing that you kind of go, well, you know, Brady could be in the conversation because he had this incredible run in the fourth quarter. But again, with the 2 Super Bowls New England lost, it pretty much came down to a catch. With one of them, it was David Tyree's miracle catch, and then Plaxico with that miracle touchdown run. The other one was Wes Welker. Had Wes Welker been Rob Gronkowski's size, that would have been a catch. And it's just like, it was just down to one play. Kind of like the Eagles Super Bowl. You had 2 quarterbacks try to pull off trick plays. One worked, one didn't. And for a team that is notorious for trick plays in New England, it was just, you know, I was sitting there expecting Brady to make a catch, and when he didn't, it was almost like a jaw dropper and if you look at it, again, when you talk about greatest of all time, you have, especially in baseball, you have to sit there, and if you're going to bring up greats, you've got to bring Nolan Ryan's name up as one of the greats in baseball. I mean, it's like, you know, we can't have our greatest of all time. And that's what I was hoping to use a little bit of the show, too, once we got a preset list out, was to talk about one of our topics from a previous episode was our Hall of Fame thing. And I don't know if this was what you said you were going to bring up, but when I was looking at criteria for what gets somebody in the Hall of Fame, most leagues require players to be retired for so many years. Mm-hmm. But when I was looking at our list, I decided that, you know, it should be, they have to be retired for at least 1 season. Unless that player dies during the season, that can kind of fast track them onto the list. If they are retired and they unretire and come back and play, kind of like T.O.'s considering, I think that we kind of make it amend the rule that they have to be retired 2 years if they unretire
Call it the Brett Favre rule.
Yeah, we can call it the Brett Favre rule.
Anyway, the point I was trying to make with LeBron was maybe LeBron does deserve some of the criticism launched at him because the NBA is more player focused than the NFL. Where the NFL, you have 11 people on the field at one time, then you're not even on the field for half the time when, in like Brady's case, when the defense is on the field. Now, LeBron plays offense, defense. He's on the field a lot, or in the court a lot. And yet, he only has a 33% winning percentage in the finals. So, maybe he does deserve some of this, because he hasn't exactly played the greatest in all of his finals matchups. Been swept twice. I think he won against Golden State. He had to take it to 7 games. So, the question is, do the goose eggs in some of his performances degrade his position? Does that make him less of a player? I don't think so, because there's not as many players that have done what he's been able to do. Go to the finals 9 times, 8 in a row. Sometimes with limited supporting cast, sometimes with, the big 3. I don't think that it makes him... I think it makes him one of the greatest player maybe of this decade. And Kobe was the greatest player of last decade, and then it would be Jordan before that. As far as greatest of all time, we're going to have to let his career play out before I make any calls on that.
Okay, so I think I've already hit on this during one of our other episodes, but we were going to come up with a criteria, 10 requirements to get you into your respective sports Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
I did add, I think we already talked about this, but the exception to the rule of being retired for a year is if a player has played in their respective sport for 20 years, they're automatically in. Which means that if Brady is still playing during like the 2020 season, he's automatically on our list. Which hopefully we'll still be doing the show by then. If not, we'll go to like a sporadic thing. But I think we pretty much had a good kind of set criteria. We just couldn't figure out 5 more requirements. Like, I think one of the interesting things I found was, would you automatically consider a guy for the Hall of Fame for an induction in the Hall of Fame if they were MVP in the championship? Would that give them consideration for that one good moment, like Malcolm Smith did for the Seahawks, or...
It could be like, okay, so the NFL Hall of Fame has exhibits based on moments as well. They don't get official inductions, but you've got, I think, the footballs or player jerseys from some of the 7 touchdown passing games. So there is stuff like that. I'd say we could probably induct a moment in, maybe not the player, so like the helmet catch. I mean, that's like an iconic moment. But David Tyree didn't do anything other than that. Like anything. He was a Pro Bowler special teamer. I'll give him that. But besides that, nothing.
One of the guys I put on our list for our football induction, I put on there because I feel like he does deserve a spot in Canton when his eligibility comes time, is Devin Hester. Because you've got a guy who, again, when you go back to this greatest of all time thing, Deion Sanders was, in his time, the greatest return man in all of football until that torch was passed to Hester, who, if you think about it, you kind of have to sit there and say, well, yeah, this guy could be the greatest at this of all time if they had a rule change. Like, Devin Hester is responsible for one of the kickoff change rules when they moved the line. And when they talk about in the NFL the new kickoff rule for this year to reduce injuries. I blame Roger Goodell and the front off and the competition committee, rules committee, whichever one it is, for changing the kickoff and moving it back from the 30 to the 35 or whichever one it was, because if you leave it to where the kicker can kick the ball straight through the end zone for a touchback, it kind of does cut back, but you take some of the strategy out of the game when you start moving the line. I do agree with the new rule, though, as far as not letting the kickoff team take off running until the ball is kicked, because then that takes some of that momentum away to keep them from getting hurt. Because, again, a lot of people say, well, it's just a video game. I have played Madden before and injured players on the other team on kickoff just by running down and nailing them to loosen the ball up. And on one game, I think I took out 4 players in one half.
Yeah, and I think keeping the kickoff team from running before the ball's kicked, I think that that will kind of actually increase returns. Because if the kicker doesn't get it out the end zone, or you catch it right at the edge of the end zone, the kickoff team might not be as close, and you might want to take that chance. So I think it does both reduces the speed of some of the collisions while still making kickoffs relevant. So maybe if they had done the move forward of the kickoff line and the rule that the kickoff team couldn't run before the ball's kicked at the same time, there would have been less controversy about it, because they would have been like, oh, well, you've given them 5 extra yards, but then they can't get a running start.
I did have, because we still got like 15 minutes on our expected time. What about, do you think our Hall of Fame list, one of the requirements on there, not really a requirement that'll keep people out, but one thing that can help somebody's eligibility on the list, be if a team or sport has retired their number?
Well, yeah, I mean, if a team or sport's retired your number, then you're probably already in anyway. But that would give you special consideration. A team may be less than a sport. If your number's retired sport wide, then you're pretty much guaranteed a spot in.
I did have an interesting idea, and one of them was the celebrity induction. Not necessarily that a celebrity may have a contribution to a team, like Jack Nicholson sitting courtside at the Lakers all the time, but like, here's a couple I wrote down here. Abbott and Costello for the who's on first bit. Mm-hmm. That's something that even baseball players today kind of make jokes about. Also, Chadwick Boseman, who plays Black Panther, played Jackie Robinson at 42.
Talented actor. Barry
Pepper, who played in 61 as Roger Maris and also played as Dale Earnhardt in the ESPN movie. He's done a lot of sports-themed movies as well. Also, because these are 2 of my favorite actors to ever play a baseball player, Charlie Sheen and Dennis Haysbert, who played Rick Wild Thing Vaughn and Pedro Serrano, which have always been 2 of my favorite characters from a baseball movie. We've also got A League of Their Own. Kevin Costner, who played in Draft Day. I've even actually considered Al Pacino for our Football Hall of Fame, because I love his character of, what is his name? Tony D'Antonio or something like that in Any Given Sunday. Keanu Reeves and The Replacements. That was a pretty good one too. So it's kind of, I kind of think that maybe, again, I know we harp on this every episode about subscribing and liking our stuff, but if once we get enough subscribers, maybe we change our Hall of Fame list. I think I've got it down to 1 celebrity, 1 executive, 1 owner, 1 coach, manager, crew chief on that level, being on the list with the rest being players, but maybe tweak that and change it to 13 if we have enough people start liking it. We put a poll on our Facebook page.
Make a fan vote.
And let the fans have one vote, and we'll make a notation, this is our fan vote winner. Kind of like what they do with NASCAR's All-Star Race. Because, most sports and most shows love their fans. And don't worry, I will not fire you if you put a Facebook message or a tweet out that I don't like. You won't be fired from the show.
You gonna fire me if I kneel during the intro?
Nah.
I mean, we both sit for it, so it's not like that's that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's kind of our little joke because we don't go with the whole politicking thing. Nope. But now this just curious. This is just the thing. This just popped in my head. I don't know why, but I guess this goes back to what you're talking about the moments.
Mm-hmm.
What if because right now we are sitting at having, if I can pull it up right, we have 5 different Hall of Fames that we're going to do. Mm-hmm. One for racing, one for NFL, one for NHL, NBA, and baseball. Should we do a team Hall of Fame where we can kind of say, the 1972 Dolphins are in, the 2000 whichever Patriots are in, the Golden State Warriors are in. Not necessarily,
2016 ones where they won all them games.
Yeah, and you can kind of induct the team. It would be like the team, say, the Yankees and the Montreal Canadiens because they have 20 plus championships.
Yeah.
The Green Bay Packers, although they've won, what is it now? 3? Is it 3 or 4 Super Bowls?
Who?
The Packers.
The Packers have 3. No, they have 4.
So
Mark Star won 2.
So overall, they have pretty much like 13 football championships.
Yeah, going back to the NFL championship days.
Now, some exceptions to that rule would be the Ottawa Senators, my favorite hockey team, because there's 2 different versions of the team.
Yeah.
To go a further point, we will consider inducting the Los Angeles Extreme of the XFL. They're the only league champions. You can, because the way we've kind of criteriaed our thing, you can't go in our Hall of Fame as a player and a coach. It's whichever one's your contribution more. Kind of like Mike Ditka, coach of the Chicago Bears champion team. That would be what we'd look at for him.
Yeah. Now, you say the only champion in the XFL, but the XFL says it's going to be back. So don't put the cart before the horse. You put them in there, and then all of a sudden you have a team winning championships left and right in the XFL. You got to put them in too.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those
catch-22s.
Yeah, I'm behind the 8 ball. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of that's one of those things we're still going to have to kind of work on is our Hall of Fame. I've kind of come up with 5 criteria, so I kind of was like, I'll let Jacob come up with the other 5 so he can kind of consider something. I'd also like to get a couple people who aren't part of the show to, what do you think makes a Hall of Famer? What do you think would be a good thing to let somebody in the Hall of Fame? Because we've already said that Pete Rose's actions, as far as betting, is not going to prevent him from being listed in ours. Mm-hmm. I mean, to Pete Rose, that might not mean something, but to somebody who loves baseball like I do, I think he deserves to be in. I know a lot of people would say that Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa, Barry Bonds, those guys don't belong in. But I'm not looking at how many steroids they used. I'm looking at their on-the-field contributions. 70, what was it McGwire did? 71 home runs?
I think it was 71.
71 a season. I'm not looking at that. 73 in Bond season. I don't care because Babe Ruth hit 61 home runs or 60 home runs in a season in a different era than Roger Maris and Barry Bonds did. Mm-hmm. There's different eras. We have to look at different things. And you can't sit there and overanalyze a guy like Bonds and say, well, he needs to be stripped of all his home runs. Well, how do you argue that if he hit out of those 765, 756, something like that? What if 30 of those home runs were off Roger Clemens? You can't strike him because it's an even playing field.
Yeah. It's a different era. You have the steroids era in baseball. And honestly, PEDs have kind of gotten into every sport. I'm going to be completely honest. To bring up a point with that, we've got Lance Armstrong, who won, 7 Tour de France? Yeah, 7 Tour de France. 6 Tour de France. For several of his wins, if you try to award the win to the first rider with no doping allegations against him, you have to go very deep in the field. I think one of them you had to go to the 30s to find a rider that did not have any doping allegations. So, yes, it's against the rules of the league at the time, but everyone was doing it.
So, so that everybody's not thinking we're making all this stuff up as we go, because we've been discussing the Hall of Fame thing for probably, at least 3 months. But we've never put anything, until we've done the actual show.
We never put anything solid together.
Now, I've been working on this, not actively, but I've been compiling stuff for years. So bad that I was actually looking at a list of some of the players I was considering for the football and baseball. It was so long since I had actually, considered doing this, because the podcast idea has been something for years, but until, 2, maybe 3 years ago, when you first planted the idea in my head to do it, that I didn't get serious. Tom Glavine was still an active baseball player when I was doing the list. But, okay, do we have any criteria for people? Actually, yes. That should be our number 6 rule. They need to have a minimum of time in their sport. What would you think would be a good number? Because, most careers aren't solid.
I think probably 5 would be a good number, because no matter the sport, you probably spent, if you're good at it, you probably spent 5 or more years. You start getting longer than 5, you start running into people who had short careers, yes, but powerful careers.
Yeah, there's been some guys, and stupid alert. You may have a guy come in and he may only last 3 years in the league and have a career-ending injury, but in those 3 years he had a major impact. Obviously there's certain guys that won't make our Hall of Fame. Probably the most glaring names that go on that list. I got to go to football. Both are quarterbacks. One wasn't really a big impact starter, is Ryan Leaf. The other guy is probably the worst quarterback in franchise history for the Panthers, and that's Chris Weinke.
What a disappointment.
Regrettably, there is another Panther that I would also put on that list that is nowhere near going to get any look, is Dan Morgan. Because, to me, it's like you were more of a detriment than an asset to your team. And when you think about it, that's another thing. And I'm glad we finally got a 6th thing on the list for that. But, even I think Peyton Manning's going to be on one of our early lists to go in. Just because, his defense has carried him to several of his championships. But at the same time, you can't argue against that, I don't want to say drill sergeant, but kind of that general of the team. And on that same note, that's the thing that I would have to say about Kobe and LeBron. even if you're one of those detractors against him, you still got to say, hey, they are awesome. And I know this is breaking one of our rules, but Brady, Peyton, Kobe, LeBron, these guys were, if you want to say it, they were one hell of an athlete for their team because they were just so much of a big asset to their team that, yeah, you can argue that one year the Patriots missed the playoff on like a tiebreaker when Brady hurt his knee. Still, it showed how much of an impact that he was on the team when he's not there.
Yeah.
Now, again, with our exception to that rule is some guys, you could sit there and say, well, no, they weren't the best player on their team.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, again, I got to go back to the Panthers on this again. When they went to that first Super Bowl against New England, Rodney Peete was not an impact player on the team, but what he did to basically coach Jake Delhomme as like a personal quarterback, it just kind of helped. And you look at that now. How do you feel about somebody like Steve Smith?
Steve Smith is a tough case, and I'm a little biased in that, I'll be honest. But Steve Smith, I honestly would have to vote against him. There's a lot of receivers I feel that were better than him even in his own time, but I still have a soft spot for him.
So you're saying he's on your list of he would not go in?
Yeah, he'd definitely be more the Hall of Very Good than the Hall of Fame, because he meant a lot to one team, but honestly didn't mean a whole lot to the league as a whole. And a lot of that has to do with the lack of success that the Panthers had in points of his career there.
On that same note, another Panther player,
Mm-hmm.
Sam Mills.
Oh.
Now, here's a guy who, as a player, was a big impact on the team. As a coach, was a big impact. Since he passed, to me, he's probably more of an important impact person on the franchise than even when he was a coach or player for the team, because the whole keep pounding thing for the Panthers is his whole...
It's his legacy.
That's his whole thing. That's kind of... I mean, at the same time, you can kind of say, well, that's Peyton's thing with the Omaha, but, you know, it's one of those things. This is something that every time a guy shows up for the Panthers team, they're going to see that keep pounding, and automatically in their head, they're going to know Sam Mills.
That's another tough one. But I think if you wanted to say that his contribution, not just his contributions on the field, but his contributions as a whole, then I would vote yes. You know,
Well,
if you just want to say his on-the-field performance, then no.
I think we could actually tweak
Mm-hmm.
our Hall of Fame class. Since we have 12, we could actually drop that number of players each year. Well, because, you know, we said we would only do one coach, crew chief a year to Hall of Fame. We could actually say Sam Mills could go in. We can create another category and call it contributors. Because baseball, they do like pioneers who are contributors. We could kind of say, you know, Sam Mills was one of those contributors to that. On that same note, guys like Dennis Byrd had his career cut short with an injury. But what his impact was, same thing. Pat Tillman is another one that could be on that list of contributors. Be a good idea. But again, like we were saying, it'd be nice to get us some outside people on here to kind of, you know, what would you consider to be a Hall of Famer? And we've already got that short list. And since you are in charge of you were the person in charge of helping get our guest on the show.
Yeah, we're still working on that.
I still say we get Mr. Pittsburgh on here, since he seems to be the guy who is the exception to the rule, and you could put him down, his name and his contributions to your fantasy football league, and put an asterisk beside it and say, this guy has pretty much broke that one rule of drafting an entire team and still making a success out of it. I still have yet we've done what, 2 or 3 seasons?
3 seasons. You joined early first season, about midway first season. You took over a struggling team.
And yeah, that's with him being able to make a good record each year with having just Steelers players pretty much on his team. It's an exception to the rule. So hopefully by the next time we record, we'll have all 10 requirements for the Hall.
Yeah, you'll have to send me that document so that I can look at it and see what else we might need or anything we might not need.
The other thing I did was I went online, looked up what the requirements are for each Hall of Fame,
mm-hmm.
and any listener listening, don't know how many times we can hit this point, but there will not be any, you got to have a percentage of the vote. We'll both agree, or it's either we both say yes or we say no to the guy. So if Pete Rose comes up and you say yes, I say yes, he's in. If Terrell Owens comes up and you say no, I say yes, he's out. It's got to be unanimous or no. And being that we're at least doing 8 players at the minimum, it's going to be 8 players each year. So we've got that working for us. And I have had to argue with myself on this. As far as the first list for baseball, I almost had considered on my list every person on the New York Yankees list 1 through 9 of retired numbers, because they've had 9, and that's being that one of them's a coach, that fits our requirement. And okay, I got you another one. This just popped on my head. George Seifert, 49ers and Panthers coach. I have heard arguments that said he is not considered for the Hall of Fame because of that 1-15 season he had with Carolina. Because they said the only reason he won Super Bowls in San Francisco, that was Bill Walsh's team he took, so they've argued against him. I still feel he's won Super Bowls, so he's eligible. Now, he's not first ballot like Tom Landry or Vince Lombardi, or did we? Actually, I don't think it's on here. It's not. I don't have it listed, but do you want to change the rule we have that says owners, crew chiefs, and executives can be active and make it coaches as well?
Yeah, I think we could do that. Some coaches coach for a long time, and then so I don't think it'd be fair to make them wait when they can have careers that span. Like, I mean, you think about like Bill Belichick. He's been coaching for a long time, even before he was a head coach. You know, he's defensive coordinator.
Yeah, he's been coaching since
assistant.
He's been coaching since the 80s. So we're not going to exclude them. So, because I mean, I know 2 coaches right now off the top of my head that are retired, but I would say are eligible, and that's Chuck Noll and Bill Cowher. I almost said Belichick. What do you think about a guy like, trying to think of somebody that had a good and bad coaching career? Okay, prime example. Say Hugh Jackson, who struggled as Raiders coach and has struggled as Cleveland coach. Say he were to go to, because this again is a rumor I've been hearing a lot about, Cincinnati. Say he goes to Cincinnati, and I know a couple people we know would love to hear what I'm about to say turn into reality. But what if he were to go to Cincinnati and after 3 seasons there, take the Bengals and win a Super Bowl? Would he be eligible? Because, you know, it usually takes you about 3 seasons before it's your players you're putting in. Or even John Gruden. Do you think he deserves a spot?
Now, Gruden, I would say... Gruden, I'd probably say no. And I'd say the same for Hugh, unless he could win multiple ones. yes, it's hard to win a Super Bowl, but sometimes coaches can come in and win one, and it's a one-shot deal. They never catch that magic again. They're always trying to do the same thing that won them it the first time, and they can't repeat it.
Sean Payton and Mike McCarthy would be prime examples, I think.
There you go.
Because, see, unfortunately, the whole Bounty Gate thing with Peyton, to me, overshadows anything with Belichick. Because, there was one Super Bowl, and it was connected to their scandal. Belichick's scandals have been on seasons sometimes where they didn't win a championship. And, I don't know if for you, if that blurs the line that we're talking about off the field, because it's the off the field thing, is that something we're just considering for players or coaches?
I think, okay, so like off the field, if it's not related to the game. So like something that came up prior to the show, where we were talking about pre-show, was about the Black Sox, where there were, 6 players or something that...
Actually, I think it was, I want to say it was 8, because that's why they called the movie about them 8 Men Out.
Yeah,
I think it was 8.
That. Where they took bribes to throw a World Series.
Versus the Pete Rose thing.
Versus Pete Rose, where there's no evidence that he ever bet against his own team. There's never been any evidence to come out to suggest that. Yes, he had a gambling problem. But I think if your off-the-field actions are detrimental to your on-the-field stuff, then maybe it's a hard line. It's a hard line. And you can say, well, what about the Patriots scandals? The Patriots scandals, I'll be honest, they've been blown out of proportion.
Especially the deflated football
The
thing.
deflated football ones was so dumb. I don't think there should really be any rules on how much air pressure should be in the ball. If you want the ball to be flat, fine. It's not going to fly.
I've tried to throw a deflated football, and that thing does not go well.
So there's evidence that he wanted the ball softer. Okay? I guess he just likes the grip better that way. I don't understand what the issue is. I could see the issue if it was a kicking ball and they've got it like overinflated so they can kick it better. That I would understand. It's just the feel of the football. It doesn't change the weight so much. It doesn't change how it flies so much. It's just the pressure on it. So that one is dumb. The Spygate one is a little bit worse. The Spygate one's a little bit worse because they received a memo from the league that they couldn't film in this one spot, and they did it anyway. Now, that is a little bit worse, but then you have, and you brought it up before, Josh McDaniels kind of gets in trouble for the same thing in Denver when he's head coaching there, and it gets kind of swept under the rug. Yes, they got punished, but it gets kind of swept up under the rug, where the Patriots, they were throwing out draft picks, and they were talking about it on ESPN every night.
Yeah, that's why I kind of wanted to see your standpoint on the Belichick and the scandal, because at the same time, you can't argue for or against something like that, because they're not identifying all the players in this, and everybody always puts that zero in on Belichick for all this stuff because he's GM and coach. But at the same time, when you're talking about like Deflategate, and we're throwing Brady under the bus, I always look at it like this: Deflategate and Bountygate were similar situations. Head coach of the Saints, Peyton, suspended for a year. Defensive captain, suspended for 4 games. Defensive coordinator, suspended indefinitely. Where on the Patriots side of thing, they threw Brady under the bus. He was the only one to get in trouble. Belichick didn't get in trouble as head coach for it.
I think they caught some fines, but yeah, no suspension.
There was no suspension for him. There was no suspension for McDaniels, who obviously was the guilty party, but nobody ever looked at him. And And so it was just, to me, not that clear. Now, what we do need to do is sometime before we record again, just have a day where we sit down like we did before, but this time, instead of just figuring out, like, getting the program and stuff working, just sit down and kind of hammer out this and go ahead and get our first Hall of Fame list for each, because I feel like if we're doing 12 for each class, once we get the rules hammered out, we'll come up with an early list of, I'll send you the list too, and we can kind of look at it, because I want to get your input as far as adding, like, coaches from other sports. We'll add the coaches in too and everything, and then we'll come up with an early list of maybe double, where each class is going to be 12. You come up with a list of 12, I come up with a list of 12, where it fits each criteria, and then we'll kind of compare, and then whoever's the same on the list, because I'm pretty sure our first lists are going to have some common. And just like in jury selection, I think what we'll do is both of us will get to induct somebody that's just our vote. So, and we'll do that for the players. So we'll have 6 players that we agree on, and then one for each of us, and then eventually we can get the fan vote. Maybe we can start first off with the Fantasy Football League. There's 8 of us. We'll let those 6 kind of help us decide, because I know we could get a lot of people. What we need is, maybe we'll work on making up some business cards for, like, the show, and we'll just kind of start passing them out. Hey, here, just go in here and.
Yeah, I think that would be a good thing to get out, get the show out. And
I mean, I actually talked
exposure.
I talked to a guy about a month ago at one of the meetings I went to, and he was a guest speaker, and we were talking about it and talking about another podcast I listened to, and I told him about it, and he said, that sounds pretty good. What is it again? So I kind of went on my phone, pulled it up, showed him everything. He hasn't liked it yet because his schedule, pretty much out of 7 days a week, he's probably busy 5 at least. The other 2, he's planning for the other 5 days. So, there's somebody in Texas that knows about our show now. So it's, especially if we can get our other fantasy football people involved in it. And hopefully, if you're listening to this and you listen to the show, it's probably going to be 2 weeks when we do our next show. Right, a couple days before my birthday. Before I get to, and I'm sorry that I got to make this joke about LeBron, but my age is going to be his NBA Finals record. I'm glad I'm not Michael Jordan or Kobe's record age yet, but 6-0, 6-0, 5-1? No, that's my dad. It's 6-0. But even if we don't use people from our fantasy league as our guests, which I'd love to get a couple of them on here anyway.
Yeah, especially when fantasy football really talk starts heating up.
Yeah, kind of get their idea of what they do. But all in all, I think it was a good show. Half of it scripted, half of it just off the hip like we like to do.
Yeah, we had some rails, but we tended to ignore some of them too. We went off the rails a little bit.
Always good to do that.
Always good. Keeps it interesting.
Keeps us on our toes too, so hopefully next time we do the show, we have a guest, maybe.
Hopefully. Alright. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of the Not So Neutral Zone. You got anything to share, David?
Other than going on Facebook and liking the Facebook page, or going to YouTube, subscribing and watching the videos and giving us some feedback through the email, notsoneutralzone@yahoo.com.
Be sure to smash that like button.
And the subscribe button.